I had always prided myself on my rationality. I believed the world operated on clear rules and logic, that nothing was truly beyond understanding. But all that changed the moment I stepped into Elysium Holdings. The building was an old, crumbling structure that seemed to breathe with a life of its own, its shadows deepening with every passing hour. From the moment I entered, I felt an unsettling presence, a thick, almost tangible heaviness in the air that pressed down on me. The walls, adorned with peeling paint and faded photographs, whispered stories of a bygone era, stories I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The dim, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, twisted shadows that danced ominously at the edges of my vision. I thought I could hear something in those whispers, something that resonated with a sense of foreboding. Mark, a nervous coworker who had started just the week before me, showed me to my desk. He moved quickly, his eyes darting around as if he were being watched. As he explained the basics of the job, his voice barely above a whisper, I couldn't help but feel his anxiety seep into my own skin. The atmosphere was charged, suffocating, as if the very building were a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. The office layout was strange, almost labyrinthine. Hallways twisted in unexpected directions, leading to dead ends or doors that appeared to go nowhere. I looked down at my new desk, cluttered with outdated technology and papers yellowed with age. It felt like stepping into a time capsule, a place where the modern world had forgotten to tread. As the day wore on, the office emptied slowly. My colleagues shuffled out, glancing over their shoulders as they left, as if something lurked just out of sight. A chill settled in my bones as I became acutely aware of the silence that enveloped me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing in the stillness, reminding me of the passing time. After Mark left, I noticed a bulletin board in the corner of the room. It was cluttered with notes, announcements, and odd warnings. One crumpled sheet caught my eye, pinned at the top with a rusty thumbtack. The title read, "Guidelines for Safety," written in shaky, uneven letters. My curiosity piqued. I stepped closer, my heart racing as I began to read. 1. Do not leave your desk after dark. 2. If you hear whispers, ignore them. 3. Do not go to the third floor after 7 p.m. 4. If the lights flicker, stay still. 5. If someone knocks on your door, do not answer. 6. At midnight, all windows must be covered. Each rule sent an icy shiver down my spine. They felt like the desperate warnings of someone who had faced unspeakable horrors. I glanced around the office, half expecting to see someone watching me, waiting to see how I would react. But everyone seemed absorbed in their work, eyes glued to their screens. The clock ticked relentlessly, and the office felt increasingly claustrophobic. I tucked the paper into my pocket, a strange mix of unease and intrigue swirling within me. The day crawled on, and with time passing, I started working on my assigned tasks. I even forgot about the rules for a while. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere thickened. The shadows lengthened ominously in the corners of the room. I tried to focus on my tasks, but every flicker of the lights pulled my attention, each strange sound echoing in my mind. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I could feel the weight of the building pressing down on me. By the time 7 p.m. approached, the office was mostly empty. The last few employees gathered their belongings and hurried out, casting wary glances around as they exited. I could see the tension etched into their features, the urgency in their movements. It was as if they were trying to outrun something unseen, something waiting just beyond the safety of the office walls. I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach as I remembered the rules. When Mark finally dashed out, muttering something about the bus, I was left alone in the flickering light, enveloped by an unsettling silence. The moment the clock struck 7 p.m., the lights dimmed further, and I felt an inexplicable urge to flee. But a stubborn curiosity kept me anchored to my desk, as if some force was compelling me to confront whatever lay beyond. As the shadows thickened, I felt the air grow heavy, charged with an energy that prickled my skin. The first flicker of the lights caught my attention, and I instinctively remembered the sixth rule. If the lights flicker, stay still. But it was difficult to remain still when the shadows seemed to writhe, almost alive, creeping closer with each passing moment. Then came the whispers. They started as a low murmur, indistinct and barely audible, but soon they escalated into a cacophony, swirling around me like a cyclone. I could feel them tugging at the edges of my mind, beckoning me to listen, to respond. I fought against the urge, recalling the fourth rule. If you hear whispers, ignore them. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the silence, reverberating off the walls. My heart raced and I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. A voice called from the other side of the door, faint yet clear. Panic surged within me. Should I help? But the eighth rule warned against it, urging me to stay silent. The air felt thick with tension as the knocking continued, morphing into a furious pounding that rattled the door. I pressed my back against my desk, heart hammering in my chest as I fought the instinct to respond. The shadows rifted at my feet, and I felt a coldness seep into the room, chilling my bones. Then, as if in response to my indecision, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. When they resumed, now dimmer and more erratic, I felt a rush of cold air wash over me, and the whispers turned to a low growl. The very walls seemed to close in, and I realized that whatever was outside wanted to get in. I turned my gaze towards the door, heart pounding. The air felt electric with anticipation, and I knew that something terrible lay just beyond the threshold. Remembering the rules, I had to act. I bolted from my desk and yanked the door open, adrenaline surging through me. The hallway was empty, the shadows stretching into the dim light. But I felt a presence lurking at the end of the corridor, watching. I stepped forward cautiously, drawn by an invisible threat. My instinct screamed for me to turn back, but curiosity held me captive. And then I saw it. A figure, large and grotesque, lurking just beyond the reach of the light. Its limbs were elongated and twisted, its skin a sickly grey, mottled and pulsating as if it were alive with its own darkness. Its eyes glowed, twin orbs of pale light that reflected the dimness around it. I stumbled back, heart racing. I had forgotten the first rule: do not leave your desk after dark. I was still on the second floor, but the overwhelming sense of dread pushed me to retreat, to escape whatever horror awaited. The creature moved with an unnatural speed, gliding toward me, its form shifting in the shadows. I just turned and ran. I wasn't the fastest runner, but that time I covered the distance to my office in seconds. As soon as I stepped over the threshold, I slammed my door shut and leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature outside began to pound on the door again, and I realized that the only thing separating me from my doom was a small layer of wood. I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. The rules were not mere guidelines, they were chains binding me to this fate. I had to escape, had to find a way out of this nightmare. Summoning every ounce of courage, I dashed toward the window, the last glimmer of hope flickering in my mind. As I yanked it open, the cool night air rushed in. It carried the scent of damp earth and decay. I glanced back, the shadows swirling closer, hungry to reclaim me. I didn't have time to think about the consequences. I just had to leap into the unknown. With one final glance over my shoulder, I jumped from the window, landing hard on the grass below. Pain shot through my body, but I rolled to my feet, sprinting away from the building. I could still hear the whispers, still feel the shadows clawing at my back, but I refused to look. I ran until my lungs burned, the chill of the night air cutting through me. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my home. As I locked the door behind me, a sense of relief washed over me. I was free. At least for now. But even in the sanctuary of my home, the echoes of that night lingered. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathless and shaken, trying to convince myself it had all been a nightmare. But the ruse replayed in my mind like a broken record, each one a reminder of the horrors I had faced. I avoided mirrors, fearing the reflection of the shadows lurking behind me. As days turned into weeks, I thought I had left Elysium Holdings behind. But the whispers followed me, haunting my dreams and filling my waking hours with dread. Every night, I would wake drenched in sweat, the echoes of the ruse swirling in my mind. I tried to go back to a normal routine, forcing myself to work at a coffee shop, surrounded by the bustle of life. But even there, I could feel the lingering effects of that night. Whenever someone would mention a late shift or working past dark, my skin would prickle with anxiety. The very thought of darkness sent me spiraling into panic. The strange noises continued. At times, it felt as though the shadows within my home were shifting, moving just out of sight. I would hear whispers at odd hours, voices just beyond the reach of comprehension, swirling in the corners of my mind. I became a prisoner of my own fear, each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of leaves outside sending me back to that office. One night, as I sat at my kitchen table, a flicker of light caught my attention. The kitchen light, which I had replaced twice since leaving Elysium, flickered ominously. I felt a cold sweat break out along my brow. The memories of the ruse flooded back. If the lights flicker, stay still. But I was alone. I was safe. I forced myself to breathe, pushing down the rising tide of fear. But then the flickering escalated, plunging the room into darkness for several seconds before it returned, dimmer than before. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, creeping closer. In my mind, the image of that grotesque creature flashed. I shook my head, trying to dispel the visions that threatened to overtake me. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in reality, reminding myself that I was far away from that place. Yet, the unease lingered, clawing at the edges of my consciousness. That evening, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the whispers of the night. Each creak of the house was amplified, resonating with the echoes of my fears. The darkness felt like a living thing, crawling through my mind, filling me with dread. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the sounds. But they only grew louder, more insistent, as if they were beckoning me to listen. All of a sudden, I was jolted awake by the sound of knocking. It was persistent, insistent, reverberating through the stillness of my home. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. The memories flooded back, the ruse I had broken, the horrors I had faced. As I sat on the edge of my bed, drenched in cold sweat, the knocking continued, growing louder, more frantic. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, creeping along the walls like a dark tide. I remembered the sixth rule. At midnight, all windows must be covered. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to cover the windows, my hands trembling. But as I pulled the curtains shut, I heard a new sound. Rustling, almost like movement beneath my bed. My heart dropped, a visceral fear gripping me. I hesitated, caught between the need to protect myself and the paralyzing dread that something lay in wait. I crouched down, heart pounding, and peered beneath the bed. There was nothing there, just the darkness and the chilling emptiness that clawed at my mind. I cursed myself for being so foolish, for letting my imagination run wild. But just as I stood, a voice echoed through the room, clear and cold. "You broke the rules." I turned, eyes wide, and found nothing, only the darkness wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. The air felt electric, charged with a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. But here I was, trapped in my own home, unable to escape the horror that had found me. The knocking resumed, louder this time, more insistent, each thud resonating in my bones. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the shadows crawl closer, suffocating me with their presence. As the darkness thickened, I could see the shadows begin to take shape, forming grotesque figures that danced just out of reach. The whispers turned to screams, a chorus of lost souls converging on me, a dark tide rising to consume me. I felt the shadows wrapping around my ankles, pulling me into their depths. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. I had broken the rules, and now the consequences had come to collect. Summoning every ounce of courage, I dashed toward the door, desperate to escape the impending doom. As I reached for the doorknob, it swung open on its own, revealing an abyss of darkness that beckoned me forward. In that moment, I was caught between the tangible world and the chasms of despair that lay just beyond. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to retreat, but I could feel the shadows tugging at my soul. The air crackled with an electric charge as creatures emerged from the darkness, their grotesque forms shifting and writhing. They were not just shadows, they were something far worse. Beasts, born from fear, their eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger. They surrounded me, whispering secrets of the damned, their voices weaving through my mind like tendrils of smoke. I was lost in their labyrinth of despair, unable to discern where the whispers ended and my thoughts began. The realization struck me like a thunderclap. I was becoming one of them, a lost soul caught in their web of torment. I was no longer just a witness. I was a participant, ensnared by the very rules I had thought I could defy. I felt the shadows closing in, their cold tendrils wrapping around me, suffocating me with their presence. As the last vestiges of light faded, I was consumed, a lost soul trapped in the very cycle I had sought to escape. The echoes of my own whispers filled the air, a haunting reminder that I was now part of the shadows, a keeper of secrets, forever bound by the rules that had claimed me. In the heart of Elysium Holdings, the shadows waited patiently, ready for the next unsuspecting soul to wander into their realm, eager to ensnare them with the same rules that had sealed my fate. I was just another whisper, lost to the void, forever trapped in a nightmare of my own making. As I drifted in the darkness, I could sense others around me, souls like mine, each caught in their own loop of despair, whispering their own warnings, their own tales of horror. I could feel their pain, their fear, and the collective knowledge of the rules that had bound us all. Time lost all meaning as I remained trapped in that void, waiting for the inevitable. Each new arrival brought a fresh wave of hope and despair, a reminder of my own choices and the path that had led me here. I would watch as they read the rules, a mixture of disbelief and fear on their faces, and I would silently urge them to heed the warnings. But deep down, I knew they would not listen. They never did. And as the shadows welcomed another soul into their embrace, I felt a chilling realization wash over me. The cycle would continue, and I would be both witness and participant in this macabre dance of fate, forever bound by the darkness I had once thought I could outrun.